It was a cold December morning. Fog blanketed the east dormitory wing of Merrow University. Outside room 104, a group of students stood silently, heads bowed. Inside that narrow room, second-year philosophy student Frederick Lang had been found hanging from the curtain cord, his face pale and eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. On his desk sat an unfinished letter, ink smeared across the page as if his hand had been trembling. The final lines, scrawled in panic, read, "They whisper through the walls every night." I tried not to answer, but I think they already know my name. Police ruled it a suicide caused by academic stress. The room was sealed. But just 1 week later, students from adjacent rooms began reporting strange sounds, whispers coming from room 104 despite it being unoccupied. The university called upon Dorian Vale and Lucien Crowe, two investigators known for handling inexplicable cases. On their first day at Merrow, Dorian visited the school archive. Deep in a dusty folder, he uncovered a chilling report from 1851. Another student, Harrison Miles, had hanged himself in the very same room 104, in the same position with the same method, and had left behind a final note mentioning the whispers every night. When Dorian and Lucien entered room 104, they felt an immediate shift in the air. The space was unnaturally cold, even with the hallway furnace running. The oil lamp cast strange shadows along the peeling walls, shadows that seemed to breathe. Lucien approached the headboard wall and pressed his ear against it. He paused. "Dorian, the wall. It's breathing." Dorian examined the wooden door's hinge. Beneath the inner side, barely visible in the slant of the lamp's glow, was a tiny inscription. "Turn the knob only when the walls begin to breathe." That night, Lucien dreamt he was standing alone inside room 104. The walls were pulsing like lungs, and distant, overlapping whispers filled the air, yet the room was empty. The next morning, Dorian returned with a stethoscope, ruler, lamp, and dusting powder. Lucien once again placed his ear against the wall near the bed. This time, they both heard it, phut, hiss, phut, a rhythmic burst, repeating every 33 seconds. "It's mechanical," Lucien murmured, "not natural." Dorian examined a portion of the plaster, thicker than the rest, tinged slightly green and coated with a fine layer of black soot. He scraped it away with a thin blade, revealing a layer of lead-coated wood beneath. He knocked. Hollow. "We'll come back tonight," he whispered. That night they returned with tools and oil lamps. The smell of old timber and paint filled the room as they pried open the wall. Behind it was a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a person to crawl. Etched beside the entrance in what looked like clawed fingernails were the words, "They never leave. They whisper, forever in my head." The narrow tunnel led to a stone-lined corridor. After about 30 meters, it split at a T-junction. On the wall hung a rusted metal plate. Treatment wing, level 1, cells 12 to 38. Lucien's face tightened. Dorian pulled out an old blueprint. It confirmed their suspicions. The current Merrow campus had been built atop Greywick Asylum, a mental institution shut down after a mysterious fire in 1802. They continued deeper. At the end of the hallway stood a thick iron door with a turning lock mechanism. Above it, a symbol was engraved, an eye crossed out. Dorian pressed his ear against the door. A faint pattern echoed from within. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Then silence. Dorian turned the wheel. The door creaked open easily. It hadn't been locked at all. They stepped into a circular corridor lined with pale gray tiles. The ceiling was punctuated with vents and suspended copper wires. The air smelled of mold, disinfectant, and ash. Each cell door was iron with a circular viewing slit. Inside, many of the padded walls had been shredded, The beds rusted. On several walls, fingernail-scratched messages remained. They don't hear me, so they speak inside me, endlessly. They found a strange device, GS-4 model, an old brass audio mechanism linked to copper tubes. In the experimental treatment room, a line was painted across the wall. Sound will return them to their primal state. From the ceiling, a droplet hit Dorian's hand. Blood. Above them, the ceiling showed claw marks from the inside. Dorian examined the GS-4 device, a dusty brass relic with a greenish patina and intricate etchings around its dial. He wiped the surface clean, fingertips trailing over each groove. Holding his breath, he turned the dial to setting 1. A brittle click echoed through the silence like unsealing something long buried. At first, there was nothing, only silence. Then came a faint hissing, warping into something more grotesque. It wasn't speech, not exactly. It was as if breath had learned how to mimic language but failed halfway. Fragments of sound cracked through. "Don't speak. They are listening. The wall has ears." Lucien stood frozen, his knuckles whitened around the notebook he clutched. Dorian inhaled slowly and shifted the dial to 2. A wave of sound burst forth, screams, raw and jagged, then abruptly cut off. In their place, a soft, chilling lullaby began, sung by a child's voice as if from behind thick fabric. When darkness starts to whisper, the true face will appear. If you dare to answer them, your eyes will no longer be yours. Lucien stepped back, color draining from his face. "That's not a warning," he whispered. "It's a ritual." Dorian turned off the device. For a moment, the room felt aware, as though it was listening to them in return. "Lucien," Dorian murmured, his gaze fixed on the GS-4. "I don't think this is a playback machine. It's a vessel, carrying the memory of this place." Deeper inside the underground corridor, they discovered a steel trapdoor embedded in the floor, heavily rusted and carpeted in moss. Beneath it, a spiraling staircase descended into a deeper level, where light no longer reached. The air grew thick, damp, metallic, laced with a faint scent of sulfur and medical disinfectant. At the base was a thick wooden door with no handle. A faded red warning was painted across it, smeared like dried blood. Room 0, not for treatment, not for study, never named. Dorian pried the door open with a crowbar. The room beyond was circular, its walls padded in rotting fabric. In the center stood a rusted iron bed, bolted to the floor. A charred roll of paper lay at its foot. Lucien picked it up carefully. The handwriting was frantic, deep, and repetitive. "I saw them when I no longer had eyes. I heard their dreams. They want me to repeat. I don't sleep anymore. I transmit." Dorian approached the wall. As he leaned in, a pressure, not of air, but thought, pressed against his skull. Then a voice, not spoken, but formed within his mind. They were once human, now they are living memory. He staggered back, breath shallow. His expression had changed. Lucien asked, "What did you hear?" Dorian didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the wall, as if it might answer for him. Back at the boarding house on campus, Dorian flipped through copied medical records he had discreetly taken from the university's old archive. One obscure name kept surfacing, never fully written out, only labeled as Special Patient 004, transferred in 1904. Following the trail, they discovered the person was still alive, currently held in the isolation wing of Claremont Asylum, a remote facility outside London that accepted only the most unresponsive patients. Lucien and Dorian visited on a dreary gray morning. The special ward consisted of thick stone cells behind heavy iron doors. The attending nurse whispered, "He doesn't speak to us." But every night, precisely at 3 a.m., he sits up, stares at the eastern wall, and begins to whisper. as if speaking to someone on the other side. The two investigators requested to observe that night. When the clock struck 3, the frail old man, blind in both eyes, hair white and tangled, sat up without assistance. He turned his face toward the wall and began murmuring the same line over and over. Still 4 of them, still the same room. They asked me to ask, has the new one heard yet? His voice was hoarse, yet rhythmic, like reciting a knock, knock. Everything fell silent. The lamp stopped flickering. Even the clock's pendulum stood still. A wet sentence began to appear on the wall, drawn like rusted water dripping. Now, do you hear us? Lucien rose in shock. Dorian, pale-faced, whispered, "This thing, it doesn't just exist. It's trying to come through." The next morning, Dorian sat alone in the Southern Library, carefully processing the wax cylinder recording. Analyzing the waveform, he discovered a terrifying structure. Exactly 104 sonic pulses grouped into 26 clusters. Each cluster corresponded to the name of a student who had lived in room 104, matching university records dating back to the 1850s. At the end of the recording, there was no static, only a voice, crystal clear. This time, there will be no one left to record, because the one recording is already the one listening. That afternoon, a technician assisting Dorian disappeared without a trace. On the desk, the phonograph lay open, and a single ink-stained note remained. You thought you were the one documenting, but you were always the destination. The final night at Merrow School. Dorian and Lucien decided to return to room 1041 last time, this time bringing with them an old recording device, an oil lamp, and a circle of silver salt placed around the edge of the breathing wall, the one believed to have begun to open. At exactly 3:04, the room fell into absolute silence. No wind, no ticking clock, not even the sound of their own breath, as if the space itself was being compressed. And then, the wall began to part, not with the sound of cracking, but with an eerily smooth motion. A slit opened, pitch black and infinitely deep. From within, a human face began to emerge. Genderless, eyeless, just vague, shifting features taking shape. Lucien whispered sharply, "Dorian, who is that?" Dorian didn't respond. In his eyes, he saw himself standing inside the gap with a crooked smile. Inside was reflecting the outside, but not quite the same. It was a version, learning to become him. The face in the wall moved its lips slightly. "Thank you for letting me learn to listen. Now I'll be the one asking, and you will be the one who listens." The wall slammed shut. The clock struck 3:05. Lucien jolted awake. He was sitting alone in the school's common room. No Dorian, no device, no files. No one remembered the investigation. He rushed to room 104. The door was tightly shut, as if it had never been opened. When he asked the administration, they replied coldly, "That room's been sealed for over 20 years. No one is allowed in, and we have no record of anyone named Dorian Vale ever being here." Lucien stood frozen. From behind, in the dark, no one named Dorian Vale ever lived here. On the wall of the east corridor, faint writing appeared under the morning light. "They're still here. Room 104 was never truly empty. 3 months later, on a rainy afternoon, Lucien received a package with no sender. Inside the plain wooden box was a wax cylinder, unlabeled, unmarked. Alongside it was a handwritten note, ink smudged by water. If I still exist somewhere, then my voice will be the thread that connects. Lucien placed the cylinder in the machine, turned the crank. After a few seconds of static, a familiar voice spoke. Lucien, if you're hearing this, then I haven't vanished. I'm between the fourth sublayer, behind the second wall. They don't know I'm still conscious. The cylinder ended. The room fell silent. Lucien